The cold wind bit at Vandria Golston's pale skin as she stood before the mouth of the cave, her white hair whipping around her face like threads of moonlight against the dying day. In her trembling hand, she clutched a yellowed document, its edges worn soft by time and uncertainty. 18 years old and utterly alone, cast out from the only home she had ever known, she stared into the darkness ahead and wondered if this abandoned hole in the mountain would become her tomb or her salvation. The orphanage matron's final words still echoed in her mind. "You're on your own now, girl. Don't come back." The door had slammed with such finality that Vandria had felt it reverberate through her bones. She had walked for 3 days to reach this place, her old red dress torn at the hem, her small bag of belongings growing heavier with each step. The village folk had watched her leave with pity in their eyes, whispering about the poor Omega with no family, no prospects, no future. They said the cave was cursed. They said spirits dwelled within. They said anyone foolish enough to claim it would disappear into the mountain's hungry darkness. But Vandria had nowhere else to go. She took her first step inside, and the temperature dropped so suddenly that her breath became visible, curling into the shadowed air like ghostly fingers beckoning her deeper. The cave stretched before her, wider than she had imagined, its walls slick with moisture that caught the fading light from the entrance. As her eyes adjusted, she noticed something strange. The walls were not rough and natural as she had expected. They were smooth in places, almost deliberately carved. The air inside carried a peculiar quality, something that made her skin prickle with awareness. It was not hostile exactly, but it was watchful, as if the stone itself was observing her, measuring her, deciding whether she belonged. Vandria had felt unwelcome in many places throughout her 18 years, but this was different. This felt like anticipation rather than rejection. She moved deeper into the cavern, her footsteps echoing in ways that seemed to carry meaning beyond simple sound. The acoustics were strange, layered, as if each step she took was being answered by steps taken centuries before. The sensation should have frightened her. In truth, part of her was terrified. But a larger part, the part that had always felt out of place in the ordinary world, recognized something here. Something that called to the pieces of herself she had never understood. The orphanage had been her prison as much as her shelter. She had tried to be grateful, to remember that many children had far worse fates than hers. But gratitude could not erase the loneliness of being fundamentally different, of possessing white hair that marked her as other, of feeling instincts and intuitions that no one else seemed to share. The other children had learned to leave her alone, disturbed by the way she sometimes knew things before they happened, by the dreams that would wake her screaming about places she had never been and people she had never met. The tutor had been the only one who had not feared these differences. Instead, she had cultivated them, teaching Vandria to trust her instincts, to honor the strange knowledge that would surface in her mind without explanation. "You are not broken, child," the old woman had said during one of their last conversations. "You are simply remembering what others have forgotten." Setting down her bag, Vandria ran her fingers along the stone. Beneath layers of dust and neglect, she felt ridges, patterns, something intentional. She worked by the light of a small candle, brushing away centuries of abandonment with the sleeve of her dress. Slowly, impossibly, symbols began to emerge from the darkness. Ancient markings that seemed to pulse with a life of their own, spiraling across the cave walls in intricate designs that spoke of power, of lineage, of secrets buried so deep that the world above had forgotten they ever existed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The old tutor from the orphanage, the woman who had left her this place before dying 5 years ago, had always told her she carried something greater than the world could see. Vandria had thought it was just kindness, the gentle lie adults told unwanted children to help them sleep at night. But now, standing in this forgotten sanctuary, she wondered if the old woman had known something more. As she explored deeper, her foot caught on a loose stone. She knelt down, curiosity overwhelming caution, and pulled it free. Behind it lay a small hollow in the wall, and within that hollow rested a medallion unlike anything she had ever seen. It was silver, tarnished with age, and engraved with the same symbols that covered the walls. The moment her fingers touched its surface, the medallion erupted with light. Soft, warm, golden light filled the cave, flowing from the ancient artifact like liquid sun. Vandria gasped, stumbling backward, but the light did not burn. It caressed her skin, wrapped around her like an embrace, like recognition, like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. The symbols on the walls began to glow in response, creating a constellation of ancient power that transformed the cold, dark cave into something sacred. The light faded slowly, reluctantly, leaving Vandria trembling in the renewed darkness, with the medallion clutched against her chest. She could feel it humming, a vibration so subtle it might have been her own heartbeat. Whatever this place was, whatever this artifact meant, it had responded to her. It had chosen her. Before we continue with the story, I want to thank everyone who supports the channel and loves our Alpha King romances. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, please consider clicking the link in the pinned comment to check out our Patreon and become a member. As a member, you'll get access to exclusive content you won't find here on YouTube, extended stories, special scenes, early access to new episodes, and complete romance arcs created just for our supporters. As a bonus, you'll also unlock exclusive vampire romance stories, diving into darker, more intense love stories filled with desire, danger, and passion. By joining, you're directly supporting the channel and helping us bring even more immersive stories to life. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how old you are. I hope you enjoy the story. That night, she made a small fire near the entrance and wrapped herself in her threadbare blanket, the medallion tucked safely beneath her dress. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of golden halls and voices speaking in languages she did not know but somehow understood. She dreamed of a throne room where light poured through crystalline windows, of a woman with white hair like her own wearing a crown of starlight, of a betrayal so deep it had carved scars across generations. She woke to screaming. No, not screaming. The wind perhaps howling through the mountain passes with unusual ferocity. But beneath that sound, something else. Something that made her blood run cold, and her omega instincts flare with warning. She crept to the cave entrance, peering out into the pre-dawn darkness. There, collapsed against a boulder just beyond her sanctuary, lay a man. Even unconscious and covered in blood, he radiated power. He was massive. His muscular frame sprawled awkwardly across the stone, long black hair matted with mud and gore, a short beard framing a face contorted with pain even in unconsciousness. His clothes, though torn and stained, were finer than anything Vandria had ever touched, and the scent of him, even weakened by injury and blood loss, hit her like a physical force. Alpha. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to protect herself. Alphas meant danger for Omegas like her. They meant power imbalances and forced bonds and lives lived in cages gilded with pretty lies. But as she watched his chest rise and fall with shallow, labored breaths, as she saw the deep wounds across his torso and the blood pooling beneath him, a different instinct rose up. He was dying. Vandria had never been one to leave things to suffer. She approached cautiously, keeping her distance, studying him in the growing light. He was younger than she had first thought, perhaps mid-20s, with features that would have been striking if they were not currently gray with blood loss. His hands were large, calloused, the hands of a warrior. Around his neck hung a pendant marked with a symbol she recognized from the cave walls, and across his chest, beneath the torn fabric of his shirt, she could see more symbols, tattoos, marks of lineage and power. This was no ordinary Alpha. This was someone important, someone dangerous, someone who would die if she did nothing. She made her decision. Getting him into the cave was a nightmare. He was easily twice her size, and though adrenaline gave her strength, it was not enough. She had to drag him, inch by agonizing inch, leaving a trail of blood across the stone. By the time she got him inside, near her small fire, her muscles screamed, and her old red dress was soaked with his blood. She worked quickly, tearing strips from her spare clothes to bind his wounds, using water from a small underground spring she had discovered to clean the blood away. The injuries were severe. Claw marks, deep and deliberate, made by other alphas. This had not been an accident. This had been an ambush, an assassination attempt. As she worked, the medallion beneath her dress grew warm against her skin. The symbols on the cave walls began to glow again, faintly, casting just enough light for her to see by. It was as if the cave itself wanted him to survive. For 3 days, she tended him. She made poultices from mountain herbs, the knowledge coming to her as if from a dream, as if the cave whispered instructions into her mind. She kept his fever down with cool water and kept watch through the long, cold nights, afraid that whoever had hurt him might come to finish what they started. She talked to him sometimes, her voice soft in the darkness, telling him about the orphanage, about her journey here, about the medallion and the symbols, and the strange feeling that her life had been leading to this moment. During those long hours of vigil, Vandria discovered things about herself she had never known. Her omega instincts, which had always felt like a weakness in the village, became assets here. She could sense the subtle changes in Parmon's condition before they became visible. She knew when his fever would spike, when he needed water, when he was slipping into troubled dreams that required her calming presence to navigate. Her touch seemed to soothe him in ways that medicine alone could not. She noticed other things too. The way the symbols on the cave walls would glow more brightly when she was caring for him, as if approving of her actions. The way the medallion would pulse with warmth whenever she checked his wounds, as if lending its power to her healing efforts. The cave had become more than just shelter. It had become a partner in her efforts to save this alpha's life. On the second night, as she sat beside him, exhausted from the constant vigilance, she found herself speaking truths she had never voiced aloud. "I do not know why I am trying so hard to save you," she whispered to his unconscious form. "By all logic, I should have left you outside. An omega alone with an injured alpha is asking for trouble. But there is something about you, something that makes me believe you are worth saving. Perhaps I am a fool. Perhaps I will regret this. But right now, in this moment, I cannot imagine making any other choice." His hand twitched, and for a heartbeat she thought he might wake. But he remained lost in fever dreams, his body fighting battles she could not help him with. All she could do was be present, be steady, be the anchor that kept him tethered to the world of the living. By the 3rd day, she was running on willpower alone. She had barely slept, barely eaten, focused entirely on keeping him alive. Her red dress was stained beyond recognition, her hair tangled from constant work, her hands raw from gathering herbs and preparing remedies. She must have looked half wild, like some creature of the mountains who had forgotten what civilization meant. And yet, when his fever finally broke in the hour before dawn, when she felt his skin cool beneath her touch and watched his breathing settle into the deep, natural rhythm of healing sleep, she felt more accomplished than she ever had in her life. She had saved him. Against impossible odds, with nothing but instinct and stubbornness, and the strange power that hummed through this cave, she had pulled him back from the edge of death. She collapsed beside him, too exhausted to maintain proper distance, and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning in darkness. For the first time in days, she did not dream. There was only blessed, empty rest. He never responded, but his breathing grew stronger. The gray pallor of his skin began to fade, and on the 4th morning, as she was changing the bandages on his chest, His eyes opened. They were the color of storm clouds, dark gray with flecks of silver, and they fixed on her with an intensity that stole her breath. For a long moment, neither of them moved. She could see consciousness returning to him, see him cataloging his surroundings, his condition, her presence. She waited for the questions, for the demands, for the alpha dominance that would turn her sanctuary into a prison. Instead, he whispered, "You saved me." His voice was rough from disuse, cracked and raw, but there was wonder in it. Genuine, unguarded wonder. Vandria pulled back, tucking the bloodied bandages into her small pile of supplies, trying to ignore the way her heart was racing. "You were dying outside my cave. I could not let you suffer." He tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, a sharp hiss of pain escaping his lips. She moved instinctively, pressing a hand to his shoulder, easing him back down. His skin was warm beneath her palm, almost feverish, but the dangerous heat of infection had passed. "Lie still," she commanded, surprised at the firmness in her own voice. "You lost a great deal of blood. Your wounds are healing, but they need time." He stared at her as if she were a creature from myth. "You are Omega." It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes. And you brought an injured alpha into your home." His eyes searched her face, looking for something she did not understand. "Are you foolish or brave?" "Perhaps both," she said quietly, moving back to stir the pot of herb-infused broth she had been making. "Or perhaps I am simply someone who does not leave others to die when I have the power to help." Silence stretched between them. She could feel him watching her, studying her with an attention that made her skin prickle with awareness. Finally, he spoke again. "What is your name?" "Vandria Golston." She ladled broth into a crude wooden bowl. "And you are?" Another pause, longer this time. When he answered, his voice carried weight, as if his name alone could shift the foundation of the world. "Parmon Cleist." She froze. Every child in the kingdom knew that name. Parmon Cleist, heir to the throne, the Alpha Prince whose coronation had been scheduled for the new moon. Stories of his strength in battle, his intelligence in council, his absolute authority over his pack were told in every village, every town, every corner of the realm. And he was lying wounded in her cave, having been attacked by someone who wanted him dead before he could claim his crown. She turned to look at him, really look at him, seeing past the injuries and the exhaustion to the man beneath. Yes, there was power there, an inherent dominance that came from breeding and training. But there was something else too. Vulnerability, uncertainty, the kind of raw honesty that came from facing death and surviving by the grace of a stranger. "Your Highness," she began, but he cut her off with a sharp gesture. "No, not here." His eyes held hers, fierce despite his weakened state. "Here, I am simply Parmon, a man who owes you his life." She carried the broth to him, kneeling beside him to help him drink. His hand shook as he raised it to steady the bowl, and she noticed scars across his knuckles, old wounds layered beneath new ones, a warrior's hands, a survivor's hands. "Who did this to you?" she asked softly. His jaw tightened. "Wolves who should have been brothers, members of my own pack who decided the throne would be easier to claim over my corpse than through legitimate succession." He took another sip, the warm liquid seeming to restore some strength to his voice. "They attacked during a hunt, when I was separated from my guards. I barely escaped with my life. They will look for you. Yes." He met her gaze steadily. "Which means I have brought danger to your doorstep. For that, I apologize. If you wish me to leave, I will understand." Vandria considered this. The smart thing would be to send him away, to avoid the political machinations of alphas and thrones and power plays that had nothing to do with her small, quiet life. But she had seen the symbols on the walls. She had felt the medallion respond to her touch, and she had dreamed of that white-haired woman wearing a crown, speaking words that echoed across centuries. "You will stay until you heal," she said firmly. "After that, we will see." Something shifted in his expression, a softening she had not expected. "Thank you, Vandria Golston." The way he said her name, with such careful respect, made something warm bloom in her chest. She told herself it was simply relief that he was not going to be difficult. She told herself it meant nothing. She was lying to herself, and she knew it. Over the following days, as Parmon's strength returned, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. She would hunt for food in the early mornings, setting snares for rabbits and gathering edible plants from the mountain slopes. He would rest, regaining his strength, occasionally insisting on helping despite his injuries. They talked, tentatively at first, then with growing ease. She told him about the orphanage, about growing up unwanted and overlooked, about the old tutor who had left her this cave, and the strange medallion. He listened without interruption, without pity, treating her story with a gravity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. He told her about the palace, about the weight of expectations and the loneliness of power, about advisors who saw him as a means to an end, and courtiers who smiled while sharpening knives behind their backs. He spoke of his childhood, raised to rule but never allowed to simply be, trained in combat and strategy, but never in trust or genuine connection. The more they talked, the more Vandria began to see beyond his alpha status, beyond his royal bloodline, to the man underneath. She noticed the way he would absently trace patterns in the dirt when he was thinking, the same spiraling designs that covered the cave walls. She saw how his hands, so capable of violence in battle, were gentle when he helped her prepare meals, careful not to take over tasks that she clearly enjoyed doing herself. He had a dry sense of humor that surprised her, making wry observations about court politics that had her laughing despite herself. He was self-deprecating in ways that seemed at odds with his commanding presence, admitting to mistakes and failures with an honesty that felt revolutionary, coming from someone raised to believe himself infallible. "What is the worst decision you ever made?" she asked him one afternoon as they sorted through herbs she had gathered. He considered this seriously, his fingers stilling in their work. "Trusting my brother. I knew, on some level, that his ambition outweighed his loyalty. I saw the way he looked at the throne, the way he cultivated relationships with the more ruthless members of the council. But he was family. I wanted to believe that blood meant something, that despite our differences, he would stand beside me when it mattered." He looked at her, pain evident in his storm cloud eyes. "I was wrong, and that mistake nearly cost me my life." "It was not a mistake to want to believe in family," Vandria said softly. "It was human, and being human is not a weakness, no matter what your tutors might have taught you." Something shifted in his expression, a kind of wonder mixed with gratitude. "You speak to me as no one else does, not with deference or fear or the calculated politeness of courtiers, just honesty. Would you prefer I bow and scrape and call you Your Highness with every breath?" He smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "Absolutely not. This is infinitely better." They developed inside jokes, small moments of shared understanding that felt precious, precisely because they were private. When Vandria would make a particularly cutting observation about the absurdity of royal protocol, Parmon would get a certain glint in his eye that meant he was filing it away for later. When he would tell stories about his various battle scars, each one more ridiculous than the last, she would shake her head in mock disapproval that barely concealed her amusement. She learned that he had a terrible singing voice but loved music anyway, that he could recite poetry from memory, verses about honor and duty that he claimed to find tedious but clearly treasured, that he was afraid of spiders, a fact that mortified him but that she found endearing beyond measure. He learned that she could identify plants by smell alone, a skill she had developed out of necessity, but that bordered on supernatural in its accuracy. that she had a gift for mimicry, able to reproduce the calls of mountain birds with such precision that they would answer her, that she hummed while she worked, unconscious melodies that sounded like nothing he had ever heard, but that made the cave feel warmer, more alive. "You must have friends," she said one evening as they sat by the fire, the cave entrance framing a sunset that painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. He shook his head slowly. "Allies, perhaps. But friends?" He looked at her with those storm cloud eyes. "No. I have never had what you might call a friend." The sadness in his voice made her chest ache. "That sounds like a very lonely way to live." "It is." He paused, then added quietly, "It was." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but understood. She felt her cheeks warm and looked away, focusing on the symbols carved into the cave walls instead. "What do you think these mean?" she asked, desperate to change the subject. Parmon shifted closer, studying the markings with sudden intensity. She saw recognition flash across his face. "These are old, very old, from before the current royal line took power." His finger traced one of the symbols, not quite touching the stone. "This one here, it speaks of the first bloodline, the original rulers who governed these lands centuries ago. You can read them?" "Some. My tutors taught me the ancient scripts, though most of this is beyond my knowledge." He looked at her, curiosity bright in his eyes. "May I see the medallion you found?" She hesitated only a moment before reaching beneath her dress and pulling out the silver pendant. The moment it left her skin, she felt the loss of its warmth. She placed it in his outstretched palm. Nothing happened. He frowned, turning it over, examining the symbols etched into its surface. The medallion remained cold, inert, just a piece of old metal. But when she took it back, the moment her fingers closed around it, light bloomed from its core. Soft, golden, warm. They both stared at it in wonder. "It only responds to you," Parmon whispered. "Why? I do not know." But even as she said it, a memory surfaced. The old tutor, in one of her final lucid moments before the sickness took her completely, gripping Vandria's hand with surprising strength. "The blood remembers, child. Even when the world forgets, the blood remembers." Parmon was watching her with an expression she could not quite read. "Vandria, I think this cave is more than just an abandoned shelter. I think it is a sanctuary, a place of power that was hidden away and protected." He gestured to the symbols on the walls. "And I think you were meant to find it. That is impossible. I am no one, an omega from an orphanage with no family, no history. Are you certain of that?" His voice was gentle, but insistent. "Your tutor left you this place. She told you that you carried something greater. What if she knew something about your lineage that you do not?" The possibility was too enormous to consider. Vandria stood abruptly, needing to move, to escape the weight of his words. "You should rest. Your wounds are still healing." She felt rather than saw his disappointment, but he did not press. "As you wish." That night, she lay awake long after he had fallen asleep, the medallion warm against her heart, questions spiraling through her mind. Who had she been before the orphanage? Where had she come from? And why did this ancient artifact recognize her when it recognized no one else? The dreams came again, more vivid than before. The white-haired woman was there, wearing her crown of starlight. But this time Vandria could see her face clearly. It was like looking into a mirror across time. The same pale skin, the same features, the same white hair that marked her as different, as other. The woman spoke, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. The line was broken but never ended. The power was hidden but never lost. "You are the last, child, the last of the first, and the time of awakening is upon you." She woke with a gasp to find Parmon sitting up, watching her with concern. "You were calling out in your sleep," he said softly. "Another dream?" She nodded, still shaking from the intensity of it. Without thinking, she told him everything. The woman with white hair, the crown, the voice speaking of bloodlines and power and awakening. He listened without interruption, and when she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I believe you," he said finally. "I believe all of it." He stood, moving to the cave walls, studying the symbols with new understanding. These markings, they speak of the first royal line. A line that was betrayed and supposedly destroyed over 500 years ago. The history books say they were completely eliminated, erased from existence. "But if even one survived?" Vandria whispered, understanding flooding through her. Then the bloodline continued in secret. Parmon turned to face her, and there was something fierce and protective in his expression. "Vandria, I think you are the descendant of the true royal line. I think your tutor knew this, and protected you by hiding you in plain sight, in an orphanage where no one would think to look for lost royalty. That is madness. Is it? You possess a medallion that only responds to your touch. You dream of ancestors speaking to you. You were left a sanctuary that was built by and for the first rulers." He crossed to her, kneeling so they were at eye level. "And you have the mark." "What mark?" Gently, carefully, he reached out and brushed her white hair back from her forehead. "This, white hair like moonlight. Every history, every legend of the first royal line mentions this trait. It was their signature, their symbol of power. And it vanished from the world when they were destroyed." She touched her own hair, the feature that had always made her stand out, made her different, made her a target for cruel whispers. "I thought it was just a defect. Something wrong with me?" "There is nothing wrong with you." His voice was fierce, absolute. "You are extraordinary, Vandria Golston. And I think the world is about to remember why that name should be feared and revered." The intensity of his gaze made her breath catch. They were so close, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his gray eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Her heart pounded, and she knew he could hear it, could sense the way her Omega instincts were responding to his nearness. But he did not push, did not use his alpha presence to overwhelm her. Instead, he pulled back, giving her space, treating her with a respect she had never experienced from any alpha. "We should explore deeper into the cave," he said, his voice slightly rough. "If this truly is an ancient sanctuary, there may be more hidden here, more answers." She nodded, grateful for the shift back to safer ground. "Tomorrow, you still need rest." But tomorrow brought visitors. They came at dawn, a group of 5 alphas moving through the mountain passes with the confidence of predators. Vandria spotted them from the cave entrance, her enhanced Omega senses picking up their scents on the wind. She recognized the danger immediately and ran to wake Parmon. "They are here," she whispered urgently. 5 alphas, armed, searching. He was on his feet in an instant, despite the pain it caused him. "My brother's men. They have tracked me." He looked around the cave frantically. "You need to hide. If they find you with me, they will kill you without hesitation." "This is my home," she said firmly. "I will not hide in my own home." "Vandria, please. These men are killers. They will not care that you are Omega, that you are innocent. They will see you as a witness to eliminate." She met his gaze steadily. "Then we face them together." Something flashed in his eyes. Pride, perhaps, or fear, or something deeper that made her chest tight. But there was no more time for discussion. The alphas had reached the cave entrance. They entered cautiously, weapons drawn, eyes adjusting to the dimmer light. The leader, a tall man with a scar across his jaw, smiled when he saw Parmon. "Your Highness," he said mockingly. "You have led us on quite a chase, but it ends here." "But does it?" Parman moved to place himself between Vandria and the intruders, his body language shifting into something dangerous despite his injuries. 5 against 1 wounded alpha. Such bravery. "We do what we must." The scarred man's eyes slid past Parman to Vandria. "And who is this? Your nursemaid? How sweet. Do not worry, girl. We will make your death quick." Vandria felt something stir within her, a heat that started at her core and radiated outward. The medallion against her chest blazed with sudden warmth. Around them, the symbols on the cave walls began to glow, soft at first, then brighter, filling the cave with golden light. The alphas stumbled back, confusion and fear crossing their faces. "What sorcery is this?" the leader demanded. "Not sorcery," Parman said quietly, realization dawning in his voice. "Power. Ancient power that recognizes its rightful heir." The light grew brighter, and Vandria felt it flowing through her, warm and electric and utterly foreign, yet somehow intimately familiar. Images flashed through her mind. The white-haired woman on her throne. Battles fought and won. A kingdom united under a banner of starlight. Power that had slept for centuries, waiting for the bloodline to return. The cave itself seemed to respond to her presence. Rocks shifted. The ground trembled. And from the walls, from the very stone, came a low humming that resonated in her bones. "Get out," she heard herself say, her voice layered with something other, something ancient. "This is sacred ground. You have no right to be here." The alphas looked at each other, uncertainty creeping into their expressions. But the scarred leader snarled, "Just a frightened Omega playing with old magic she does not understand. Kill them both." They attacked. Parman met the first attacker with brutal efficiency, his injuries forgotten in the surge of combat. But he was still weakened, still outnumbered. Vandria watched him fighting, saw him beginning to falter, and felt something snap inside her. The power surged. Light erupted from the medallion, from the walls, from Vandria herself. It did not burn, but it pushed, a wave of force that sent the attackers flying backward. The cave responded to her will, rocks shifting to block exits, the very air growing thick and oppressive. "Leave," she commanded again, and this time her voice echoed with the weight of centuries, the authority of queens long dead but not forgotten. "Or face the wrath of the bloodline you tried to destroy." The scarred leader struggled to his feet, but when he looked at Vandria now, there was genuine fear in his eyes. "Impossible. The line was ended. You cannot be—" "But I am." The words came from somewhere deep within her, truth rising to the surface like water from a spring. "I am the last daughter of the first line. I am the heir you failed to kill. And this sanctuary answers to me." The attackers fled. They scrambled over each other in their haste to escape, terror overriding their orders, their loyalty, their greed. Within moments, they were gone, the sound of their retreat fading into the mountain morning. The light dimmed slowly, the power receding back into the stone, into the medallion, into Vandria herself. She swayed, suddenly exhausted, and Parman caught her before she could fall. "Easy," he murmured, lowering her gently to the ground. "I have you." She looked up at him, at his face so close to hers, at the wonder and respect, and something warmer in his eyes. "What did I just do?" "You claimed your birthright," he said softly. "You awakened the power that has been waiting for you all along." She wanted to deny it, to say it was impossible, to retreat back into the safety of being no one. But she could still feel the power humming beneath her skin, could still hear the echo of that ancient voice in her mind. The truth was undeniable now. She was not just Vandria Golston, the unwanted Omega from the orphanage. She was something more. Something that the world had forgotten but could no longer ignore. "They will return," she said quietly, "with more men, more weapons." "Yes." Parman helped her sit up, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Which is why we need to act quickly. I must return to the palace, reclaim my throne before my enemies can consolidate their power." "And what of me?" He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression, a decision being made. "You come with me. Not as a refugee or a rescued Omega, but as what you are. The heir to the first line, the rightful queen of these lands." "I am no queen." "You are more queen than anyone currently sitting in power." His voice was fierce, certain. "Vandria, you have a claim to the throne that predates my own family line by centuries. If you wanted, you could challenge every ruling power in the realm. I do not want power." "I know." He smiled, and it transformed his face, softening the hard edges into something almost boyish. "That is one of the many reasons why you deserve it." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Parmon's wounds had healed enough for travel, and Vandria gathered the few possessions she cared about. The medallion, of course, and the document proving her ownership of the cave. The old red dress had been ruined beyond repair, so she fashioned new clothes from spare fabric, simple but sturdy. As evening fell, they stood at the cave entrance, looking out over the mountains. Somewhere beyond those peaks lay the palace, the court, the throne that awaited Parman. And with him, a destiny Vandria had never imagined for herself. "Are you afraid?" he asked quietly. She considered this. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also curious, and maybe a little excited." He laughed, a warm, genuine sound that she realized she had never heard from him before. "I like your honesty. Most people would pretend to be brave." "I am brave," she corrected. "Brave people are afraid. They just do not let the fear stop them." "Wise words. Where did you learn them?" "My tutor. She had many wise words, though I did not always appreciate them at the time." Vandria touched the medallion beneath her new clothes. "I think she knew what I would become. I think she was preparing me all along." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." She was. They set out at first light, traveling paths that Parman knew, routes that would keep them hidden from casual observers. It took them 4 days to reach the outskirts of the capital. 4 days of walking through forests and across rivers, of sleeping under stars and sharing stories around small campfires. And with each day, the connection between them deepened. The first night, they made camp in a grove of ancient trees, their branches so thick overhead that the stars were visible only in fragments, like pieces of a shattered mirror. Vandria had never slept outside the safety of walls before, and despite her efforts to appear calm, Parmon noticed her nervousness. "The forest will not hurt you," he said gently, settling down across the fire from her. "And I will keep watch. You can rest." "I am not afraid of the forest," she said, which was only partially true. "I am simply not accustomed to so much space. At the orphanage, we slept in a room with 20 other children. You could barely move without touching someone. This feels..." She gestured at the vast darkness surrounding their small circle of firelight. "Endless." He was quiet for a moment, then moved to sit beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Would this help?" It did, more than she wanted to admit. She allowed herself to lean slightly against his shoulder, felt him adjust his position to better support her weight, and something inside her chest unclenched. "Thank you." "You do not need to thank me for basic decency, Vandria. In my experience, basic decency is rarer than it should be." They sat in companionable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Eventually she slept, her head resting against his shoulder, trusting him to keep his word about standing watch. And he did, staying awake through the long hours of darkness, marveling at the fact that this extraordinary woman felt safe enough with him to rest so completely. Parmon told her about his childhood, about a mother who had died in childbirth, and a father who had been distant and cold. He spoke of the pressure to be perfect, to be strong, to never show weakness or doubt. He confessed his fears about ruling, about whether he could be the kind of king his people needed. One afternoon, as they walked through a meadow brilliant with wildflowers, he told her about his mother. "I have no memories of her," he admitted. "She died bringing me into the world. My father made sure I knew that fact, made sure I understood the weight of her sacrifice. Sometimes I wonder if that is why he could never look at me without seeing what he had lost." Vandria stopped walking, forcing him to turn and face her. "You are not responsible for your mother's death. You were a child being born. That is not a crime or a debt to be repaid. I know that intellectually, but knowing something and feeling it are different things." She reached out, her hand finding his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Then let me tell you what I feel when I look at you. I see strength that is not afraid of gentleness. I see power tempered with wisdom. I see a man who was raised to value conquest, but who chose compassion when it mattered most. Your mother would be proud of who you have become, Parmon. I am certain of it." His grip tightened on her hand, his eyes suspiciously bright. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear, in exactly the way I need to hear it." She smiled, squeezing his hand in return. "Perhaps I have a talent for seeing people clearly, or perhaps you are simply easier to read than you think." Vandria shared her own memories, the good and the bad, the children at the orphanage who had been kind and those who had been cruel. The tutor who had taught her to read and write, who had filled her head with stories of ancient heroes and forgotten queens. The loneliness of being different, of never quite belonging anywhere. On the second night, as rain began to fall in heavy sheets, they took shelter in an abandoned shepherd's hut. It was barely more than 4 walls and a questionable roof, but it kept them mostly dry. They huddled together for warmth, sharing Parmon's cloak, and Vandria found herself telling him about her most painful memory. "I was 9 years old," she began, her voice soft in the darkness. "There was a family who came to the orphanage, looking to adopt a child. They seemed kind, warm. They spoke to several of us, asking questions, trying to determine who might fit into their lives. I allowed myself to hope. I imagined what it would be like to have a mother, a father, siblings, to belong somewhere." She felt Parmon's arm tighten around her shoulders, offering silent support. "They chose another girl, a beta with normal hair and an easy smile. As they were leaving, I heard the mother say to her husband, 'Thank goodness we did not choose that strange white-haired Omega. Can you imagine?'" Vandria's voice cracked slightly. "And I realized that no matter how much I hoped, how well I behaved, how hard I tried, I would always be too different for anyone to truly want me." "Vandria," Parmon breathed, turning her to face him. In the dim light, she could see the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, the anger on her behalf. "Those people were fools, and they missed out on knowing the most remarkable person I have ever met. You hardly know me. I know enough. I know that you saved my life when you could have left me to die. I know that you face your fears with courage even when you are terrified. I know that you see the world with a clarity that most people never achieve. And I know," his voice dropped to a whisper, "that I have never felt less alone than I do when I am with you." They discovered shared loves. Both enjoyed the quiet of early mornings, the way the world felt clean and new before it was touched by human concerns. Both had a fascination with old stories, with history and legend, and the thin line between them. Both valued honesty over flattery, substance over show. On the third day, they came across a small village preparing for some kind of festival. Despite the risk, Parman insisted on stopping to purchase supplies they needed. He wore a hood to hide his distinctive features, but his bearing still drew curious glances. Vandria wandered through the market stalls, marveling at goods she had only ever dreamed of owning. Beautiful fabrics in colors that seemed to capture sunlight, jewelry that caught the light and threw rainbows, sweets that smelled of honey and spices she could not name. Parmon appeared at her elbow, pressing something into her hand. When she looked down, she found a simple silver bracelet, its surface engraved with a pattern of spiraling vines. "For you," he said quietly. "I know it is not much, but it is perfect," she interrupted, slipping it onto her wrist. The metal was warm from his hand, and she found herself blinking back tears. "No one has ever given me a gift before. Thank you, Parman." His smile was soft, private, meant only for her. "Then I shall have to make a habit of it." On the third night, as they sat by their fire, Parman looked at her with an expression that made her heart stutter. "I need to tell you something," he said quietly. She waited, hardly breathing. "I have known many people in my life. Advisors, warriors, nobility, servants. I have been surrounded by others every day since I was born. But I have never felt less alone than I do when I am with you." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You see me, Vandria. Not the prince, not the heir, not the alpha, just me. And for the first time in my life, that is enough." Tears pricked her eyes. "You see me too," she whispered. "Not the Omega, not the orphan, not the lost girl, just Vandria. And that is a gift I never thought I would receive." He reached across the fire, offering his hand. She took it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his fingers, the slight tremor that said he was as affected by this as she was. "When we reach the palace," he said, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand, "there will be chaos. There will be those who try to separate us, to use you for their own ends. The court is a nest of vipers, and you will be something new, something unexpected. I know. I will not let them hurt you. I will protect you with everything I have." She smiled at the fierce protectiveness in his voice. "And I will stand beside you, not behind you. We protect each other, Parmon. That is what equals do." Something blazed in his eyes. "Equals," he repeated, as if the word were precious. "Yes, that is exactly what we are." They held hands across the fire until the flames died to embers, and when they finally lay down to sleep, they did so closer than they had before, drawing comfort from each other's presence. On the fourth day, they reached the city. It was massive, sprawling. More people in one place than Vandria had ever imagined existed. The noise, the smells, the sheer overwhelming presence of so many lives pressed together made her head spin. But Parman guided her through the crowds with gentle patience, leading her toward the palace that dominated the skyline. They did not go directly to the main gates. Instead, Parmon took them through a series of narrow streets to a small door in the palace's outer wall, a servant's entrance that he knew would be less guarded. "We need allies before we make our presence known," he explained. "There is someone I trust, someone who can help us navigate what comes next." The someone turned out to be an older woman named Halira, the head housekeeper of the royal apartments. When she saw Parman, her weathered face lit up with joy and relief. "My boy," she breathed, pulling him into a fierce embrace despite the impropriety. "We thought you dead. Your brother has been spreading lies, claiming you were killed by bandits." "My brother is the bandit," Parman said grimly. "He orchestrated the attack, Halira. He wants the throne for himself." The housekeeper's expression hardened. "I suspected as much. He has been consolidating power, replacing your loyal guards with his own men, spreading poison in the council. Her eyes shifted to Vandria, taking in her white hair, her worn clothes, her Omega status. And who is this? This, Parmon said, his voice carrying a weight that made Hilira straighten, is Vandria Golston, heir to the first royal line, the true queen of these lands. Hilira's eyes went wide. She looked between them, seeing something that made her lips curve into a knowing smile. Is that so? Well then. We had best make you presentable for court. You cannot reclaim a throne looking like refugees. Over the next hours, Vandria was bathed, dressed, and transformed in ways that left her barely recognizing herself. The simple dresses she had always worn were replaced with gowns of deep burgundy and midnight blue, fabrics so fine they whispered against her skin like secrets. Her white hair was brushed until it shone like starlight, left long and loose down her back, in a style that Hilira said matched ancient portraits of the first queens, and around her neck, visible for all to see, hung the medallion. It glowed softly against her skin, a constant reminder of who she was, what she carried. When Parmon saw her, he stopped mid-sentence, his eyes widening. She saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. You look like her, he said hoarsely. The woman from the old paintings, the first queen. Is that good or bad? Good. Terrifying. Perfect. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. Are you ready for this? No, she admitted, but let us do it anyway. They entered the throne room together, and the court fell silent. Vandria had expected grandeur, but the reality exceeded her imagination. The hall was vast, with ceilings so high they seemed to touch the sky, walls lined with banners and weapons, and the accumulated wealth of centuries. And at the far end, on a throne of black stone and silver, sat a man who looked enough like Parmon to be his twin. His brother, the would-be usurper. Guards! The brother shouted, rising from the throne. Seize them! The traitor Parmon has returned with some Omega whore to... Silence! Parmon's voice cracked like thunder through the hall. He did not shout, but the command in his tone made everyone freeze. You will address the rightful heir to this throne with the respect she deserves, or you will face the consequences. The brother laughed, but there was an edge of hysteria to it. Rightful heir? She is Omega. She is nobody. She is Vandria Golston, Parmon announced to the assembled court. Last daughter of the first royal line, heir to the ancient bloodline that ruled these lands 500 years before our family ever touched this throne. And she has come to reclaim what was stolen from her ancestors. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Disbelief, curiosity, fear. Vandria felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her, judging, assessing, dismissing. She felt small, insignificant, utterly unprepared for this moment. Then the medallion grew warm, and the power stirred. She stepped forward, moving past Parmon, approaching the throne with a confidence she did not truly feel, but chose to embody anyway. The closer she got, the more the medallion glowed, until it blazed with golden light that filled the hall. And from the walls, from the very stone of the palace itself, symbols began to appear. The same ancient markings from her cave, etched into the foundation of the building, hidden beneath centuries of paint and tapestry. They responded to her presence, glowing in sequence, creating a web of light that connected her to the throne. The court gasped. Parmon's brother stumbled backward, nearly falling off the throne in his haste to escape. What witchcraft is this? Not witchcraft, Vandria said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Recognition. This palace was built on the ruins of the old capital. The stones remember who they were made to serve, and they have been waiting a very long time for the bloodline to return. An elderly courtier stepped forward, his face pale with shock. The white hair, the medallion, the awakening of the old marks. He turned to the assembled nobility. The prophecies spoke of this. They said the first line would return when the kingdom needed them most. Prophecies are stories for children, the brother snarled. She is a fraud, an Omega playing dress-up. Then let us test that claim. Parman moved to stand beside Vandria, his presence solid and reassuring. The old laws state that the throne belongs to the strongest bloodline. If Vandria is who we say she is, the throne will recognize her. If she is not, nothing will happen, and you can have her executed for fraud. It was a gamble, a terrifying risk, but Vandria understood what he was doing. He was giving her a chance to prove herself, to claim her heritage in a way that the court could not deny. She approached the throne, feeling the eyes of everyone on her. Parmon's brother had been forced aside by the palace guards, who seemed uncertain about who they should be obeying. She reached out, placing her hand on the arm of the throne. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the throne blazed with light, pure, golden, overwhelming light that poured from the stone, from the medallion, from Vandria herself. The ancient symbols on the walls flared so bright that people had to shield their eyes. And in that light, images appeared. Visions of the past, projected for all to see. The first queen, wearing her crown of starlight, ruling with wisdom and strength. Her daughter and her daughter's daughter, each one carrying the white hair, the power, the responsibility of leadership. And then the betrayal, shown in painful detail. Trusted advisors turning traitor, poison in the wine, knives in the dark. The systematic hunting and elimination of everyone with royal blood. But one escaped. A child, barely 5 years old, smuggled out of the palace by a loyal servant. Hidden in an orphanage, raised in obscurity, her heritage a secret that died with her protector. That child's bloodline, continued in secret through generations who never knew what they carried, until it reached Vandria. The visions faded, and the light dimmed, but everyone in the hall had seen. They had witnessed the truth, undeniable and absolute. Vandria Golston was the heir, the true heir, and the throne had recognized her. She turned to face the court, her hand still resting on the throne. I did not come here to take power from anyone. I came because Parman Klist, your rightful king, asked me to stand with him, because he was betrayed by those who should have protected him, and because the realm deserves better than to be ruled by treachery and greed. She looked at Parman's brother, who had collapsed to his knees, all fight gone from him. Your brother conspired to murder the heir to the throne. Under the old laws and the new, that is treason, and the punishment for treason is death. Wait, Parman said quietly, stepping forward. The punishment is death, yes. But the law also allows for mercy at the discretion of the crown. He looked at his brother with a mixture of anger and sadness. You will be exiled, stripped of title, of lands, of power. You will leave this kingdom and never return. If you ever set foot in these lands again, the sentence of death will be carried out immediately. It was more mercy than the brother deserved, and everyone knew it. But it was also a demonstration of the kind of king Parman would be, strong enough to punish, wise enough to temper justice with compassion. The guards removed the brother, who went without resistance, broken by the revelation of Vandria's identity and the failure of his schemes. In the wake of his departure, the elderly courtier who had spoken before approached the throne and knelt. Your Majesty, he said to Vandria, the throne is yours by right of blood. What would you have us do? She looked at the throne, at the power it represented, at the life of responsibility and duty it would demand. Then she looked at Parman, at the man who had shown her that power without compassion was worthless, that strength meant nothing without honor. I have no desire to rule alone, she said clearly. Nor do I believe that power should be concentrated in a single bloodline. The old ways failed because they did not adapt, did not share, did not allow for growth and change. She stepped away from the throne, moving to stand beside Parman. I propose a new way, a union of the old line and the new, a sharing of power and responsibility. She took Parman's hand, feeling the rightness of it, the way their fingers intertwined as if they had been made to fit together. I claim my heritage, yes, but I choose to share it with Parman Klist, who has proven himself worthy not through conquest or birthright alone, but through character and courage. Parman looked at her with such intensity it took her breath away. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that I do not want to be queen unless you are king beside me. I am saying that we are stronger together than we could ever be apart. I am saying... She paused, gathering her courage for the final leap. I am saying that I love you, Parman Klist, and if you will have me, I want to build this new kingdom with you. The throne room erupted in noise, but Vandria heard none of it, because Parman was pulling her close, his arms wrapping around her, his forehead pressing against hers as he laughed with pure joy. If I will have you, he repeated incredulously. Vandria, I have been yours since the moment you chose to save my life instead of leaving me to die. I have been yours since you sat with me through fever and pain and did not ask for anything in return. I have been yours since I realized that being seen by you mattered more than being respected by anyone else in the world. He kissed her then, in front of the entire court, a kiss that was tender and fierce and full of promise. She felt the power surge between them, the old magic recognizing the bond, blessing it with light and warmth. When they finally pulled apart, the elderly courtier was smiling. Then it is settled. We shall have a coronation and a wedding. The old line and the new, united. A new era begins. The preparations took weeks. There were contracts to sign, alliances to forge, traditions to honor, and others to gently set aside. Vandria threw herself into learning everything she needed to know about governance and diplomacy, about the complexities of managing a kingdom. Parman was beside her every step, teaching and learning in equal measure. They discovered that ruling together was different from ruling alone. Where Parman was decisive and direct, Vandria was thoughtful and patient. Where she sometimes hesitated, he provided confidence. Where he sometimes pushed too hard, she offered temperance. They balanced each other, complemented each other, made each other better. And through it all, their love deepened. Parman showed her the parts of himself he had hidden from everyone else. His fears about inadequacy, his guilt over his brother's betrayal, his desperate hope that he could be the kind of king who served his people, instead of simply ruling them. In the darkness of their shared chambers, with no crowns or courtiers to perform for, he was simply a man trying to be good enough for the woman he loved. Vandria shared her own vulnerabilities. The lingering belief that she did not deserve this, that any moment she would wake up back in the orphanage, that the love he showed her was too good to be real. She confessed her nightmares about failing, about the power inside her growing beyond her control, about losing him to politics or poison, or the 1,000 dangers that lurked in palace life. "You are not going to lose me," he would whisper, holding her close. "I am not going anywhere without you. Promise me." "I promise. We are bound now, you and I, not by duty or prophecy or political necessity, but by choice. Every day I choose you. Every day I will keep choosing you." And he did. The coronation and wedding were held on the same day, under a sky so clear it seemed the gods themselves had blessed the union. Vandria wore a gown of white and silver, her hair crowned with a circlet that matched the medallion at her throat. Parman stood beside her in black and gold, looking every inch the king he was born to be. But it was when they spoke their vows that the true magic happened. "I, Parman Klist, take you, Vandria Golston, as my queen, my partner, my equal in all things. I vow to honor your strength, to support your growth, to share in your burdens and celebrate your victories. I vow to be the man you deserve every day of my life. I, Vandria Golston, take you, Parman Klist, as my king, my partner, my equal in all things. I vow to stand beside you in times of peace and war, to offer truth when others offer flattery, to remind you of your humanity when the crown weighs heavy. I vow to love you not for your title, but for the man you are. When they kissed as husband and wife, as king and queen, the medallion blazed with such brilliant light that it could be seen from every corner of the city. The ancient symbols carved throughout the palace glowed in response, creating a web of light and power that blessed their union and consecrated their rule. The people of the kingdom, who had gathered in their thousands to witness this moment, erupted in cheers. Not just because they had new rulers, but because they had witnessed something rare and precious. They had seen two people who truly loved each other, who respected each other, who would rule not from a place of ego or ambition, but from a foundation of genuine partnership. That night, as they stood on the balcony of their chambers, looking out over the city that was now their responsibility, Parman pulled Vandria close. "Do you ever think about the cave?" he asked softly. "About how different things would be if you had never gone there, if I had never stumbled to your doorstep?" She leaned into his warmth, watching the lights of 1,000 homes twinkle in the darkness. "I think about it often. How one moment of compassion changed everything. How choosing to help instead of hide led to all of this. You saved my life that day. And you saved mine. Maybe not from death, but from loneliness. From believing that I would always be unwanted, overlooked, insignificant." She turned in his arms, looking up into his storm cloud eyes. "You made me believe that I mattered, Parman. Not because of ancient bloodlines or prophecies, but because of who I am." "You matter because of who you are," he agreed, brushing a strand of white hair from her face. "Everything else, the power, the throne, the destiny, those are just details. What matters is you, your kindness, your courage, your ridiculous stubbornness that makes you refuse to give up even when you should." She laughed, the sound light and free. "My stubbornness?" "Absolutely. You are the most stubborn person I have ever met." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "And I love you for it. I love you for all of it." "And I love you," she whispered. "My fierce alpha who is so careful with me. My warrior king who leads with compassion. My partner in all things." They stood together as the night deepened. Two souls who had found each other against impossible odds, who had chosen each other when they could have chosen power, or safety, or any number of easier paths. They had built something rare and precious, something that would reshape the kingdom in ways neither of them could yet imagine. In the months and years that followed, they proved that their love was not just a pretty story for bards to sing about. They worked tirelessly to reform the kingdom, to address injustices that had festered for generations, to create systems of governance that valued all people regardless of their designation as Alpha, Beta, or Omega. Vandria became known not just as the queen with white hair, but as the one who listened. She traveled the kingdom, visiting villages and towns, hearing complaints and concerns directly from the people. She established schools and hospitals, funded by taxes on the wealthy that were initially unpopular but ultimately transformative. She fought for laws that protected Omegas from forced bonds, that gave everyone the right to choose their own path. Parman became the king who led from the front. When there were battles to fight, he was there with his soldiers. When there were disputes to settle, he sat in judgment with fairness and wisdom. He was fierce when he needed to be, protecting his kingdom and his queen with the full force of his alpha strength. But he was also gentle, patient, willing to admit when he was wrong, and to learn from his mistakes. Together they were formidable. The cave, that abandoned sanctuary that had changed Vandria's fate, became a place of pilgrimage. People traveled from across the kingdom to see the ancient symbols, to touch the walls that had awakened to protect their queen. Some claimed they could feel the power there, humming beneath the stone. Others simply found peace in the quiet darkness, in the knowledge that even the most forgotten places could become sacred if you knew how to see them. Vandria returned there sometimes, when the weight of the crown became too heavy, when she needed to remember who she had been before she became queen. Parmon would go with her, and they would sit by the entrance, watching the sun set over the mountains, talking about everything and nothing. "Do you have regrets?" he asked her once, during one of these visits. She thought about it, really considered the question. "No," she said finally. "Not regrets. There are things I wish had been different. I wish I had known my family, my true heritage before it was thrust upon me. I wish the path to this throne had not required betrayal and violence. But regret? No. Every choice I made, every hardship I endured, it led me here. To you. To this life we have built. And I would not trade that for anything." He squeezed her hand, understanding in every line of his face. Neither would I. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one, painting constellations across the velvet sky. In the distance, wolves howled, and Vandria thought about how far she had come from the frightened Omega leaving the orphanage with nothing but a worn document and impossible hope. She thought about the old tutor who had protected her secret, who had given her this gift, even though it must have been terrifying to do so. She hoped, wherever the woman's spirit rested, that she knew how it had all turned out. That the child she had hidden had not just survived, but thrived. That the bloodline she had protected had not just continued, but flourished. "Thank you," Vandria whispered to the night, to the memory, to the universe that had guided her here. Parmon looked at her curiously. "For what?" "For everything. For being exactly who you are. For seeing me when I felt invisible. For choosing me every day." She turned to face him, cupping his bearded jaw in her hands. "For loving me enough to let me be strong, and for being strong enough to let me see your weakness. For being my partner in the truest sense of the word." His eyes shone with emotion in the starlight. "Vandria Golston Cleist, you are the most remarkable person I have ever known, and I am the luckiest man alive to get to stand beside you." They kissed there, in the mouth of the cave where their story had truly begun, with the ancient symbols glowing faintly on the walls around them, bearing witness to a love that had transformed a kingdom and rewritten destiny itself. And when they finally returned to the palace, hand in hand, they carried with them the knowledge that they had built something that would last. Not just a dynasty, though there would be children in time, heirs who would carry both bloodlines forward into the future. But something more important than that. They had built a partnership based on respect, trust, and genuine love. They had proven that power did not have to corrupt, that strength could be tempered with kindness, that the fierce could also be gentle, and that the gentle could also be fierce when circumstances demanded it. They had shown the world that an Omega from an orphanage could be a queen, that an Alpha raised for war could lead with wisdom, that the most unlikely people, brought together by fate and choice in equal measure, could change everything. And on quiet nights, when the responsibilities of ruling became overwhelming, they would retreat to their chambers and remember. Remember the cave, the medallion, the moment when everything changed. Remember the choice to save instead of abandon, to love instead of fear, to build instead of destroy. They would remember, and they would be grateful. For the poor Omega who inherited an abandoned cave and found her destiny had also found something far more precious. She had found a partner who saw her, valued her, loved her for exactly who she was. She had found a man who was both fierce and gentle, protective and respectful, powerful and humble. She had found Parmon, and he had found her. Two souls, two bloodlines, two destinies that intertwined and became something greater than the sum of their parts. A love story for the ages, yes, but also something simpler and more profound. A love story for each other. And that, more than any throne or crown or ancient prophecy, was the true magic, the real transformation, the fate that mattered most. Together, they ruled with wisdom and compassion. Together, they faced every challenge that arose. Together, they built a kingdom that honored both the old ways and the new, that valued tradition while embracing progress. Together they proved that the most powerful force in any kingdom was not armies or wealth or even ancient bloodlines. It was love. True, genuine, freely chosen love between equals. And that love, forged in a cave and consecrated in a palace, blessed by ancient powers and witnessed by thousands, would echo through history long after both of them were gone. It would become legend. The story of the Omega Queen and the Alpha King who loved each other enough to change the world. But for now, for this moment, they were simply Vandria and Parman. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds, who had chosen each other when they could have chosen anything else, who woke up each morning grateful for another day together. And when they looked at each other across the throne room or the breakfast table or the quiet darkness of their shared chambers, they saw not titles or bloodlines or destinies. They saw home. They saw love. And that was enough. That was everything. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.